Dodie, remember our 50th special episode? We had Christopher Maurer, the principal architect from Red House Studio, and he took us into space to Mars with mycelium structures.
I do remember it, and it was pretty out of this world.
Okay, all right, okay. This is a pun-free episode.
No, don't
okay.
say it.
But look, I promised at the end of the episode we'd have more on mycelium, because what's not to love about more mycelium? When I spoke to him, we ran over because it was just so much to talk about this extraordinary organism, or this group of organisms that are fungi.
And we figured that you are like Connor and you cannot get enough. So here comes your bonus fungi episode.
For all you shroom heads out there, fungi part 2.
So I came across some projects that were starting to develop this concept of mycotexture.
This, as we know, is Chris Maurer, principal architect at Red House Studios.
In 2009, an artist named Phil Ross did a installation in Germany where he built a very small structure inside of a gallery that was living mycelium blocks, and there were reishi mushrooms growing from the blocks, and then they would actually harvest these reishi mushrooms and make tea in the gallery while this exhibit was going on. So it was functional, it was experiential, and it was, performative in the sense that you could actually have a bolstered immune system from this experience in the gallery. So I've spent a lot of time working abroad. I worked in Africa for a number of years, both in Malawi and in Rwanda. I was a director of Mass Design Group, which is a humanitarian architecture organization. All of the projects that we've done there, I think we've done well to really work within limited resources. So in many cases, we were literally building from the earth below us. We were turning that earth into block and converting that into building material and, making buildings directly from the earth. So it's a very sustainable way of building.
Okay, so this touches on what Chris said in our space episode, that mycelium is an excellent material in areas where there are scarce resources.
Exactly. And in this case of Namibia, that's the real issue, right? The lack of sustainable resources. So Chris looked literally at what was lying around that could be repurposed. And there is a bush that encroaches on land that needs to be used for agriculture. And it's, bush encroachment.
In the case of Namibia, we're taking this waste encroacher bush and then milling that, turning that into fodder for growing mycelium, which then produces mushrooms. And then the mushrooms are taken to market. And then the waste product from that is what's turned into the block. So we have this vertical chain here where we're producing food, and then thereby doing that, we actually can, feed people, but also possibly export that, create profits from that. And that would subsidize the work of doing in our case, the humanitarian houses.
Oh, wow. So this isn't just a possible source of housing, but this is something that could be used for food and creating an economic ecosystem.
I know, it's the integration of another organism into, our system of living. It's amazing. The more I learn about mycelium and fungi, I just can't believe that there's just more to learn.
Well, you're the first one to say it. Every day is a school day.
Exactly. And this process of finding the best materials to work with mycelium, that's a lesson in itself.
So we always pair up the substrate and the fungal species depending on what the project is. In the case of Namibia, they have this encroacher biomass that needs to be utilized. So we have that as the substrate, and then what we decided would be the best fungus to grow is actually the oyster mushroom. So this is a gourmet mushroom. It's delicious. You can utilize it in almost any dish as a meat substitute. And interestingly enough, it uses the least amount of water to produce the amount of protein in that of any food there is, really. Even, meat goes toe to toe with that because meat requires so much water to produce the amount of protein it is. So in a desert environment like Namibia, we have this waste resource that we can utilize, and then we have this food material that is going to augment food security, but also help to address water security.
Oyster mushrooms. I know somebody who grows those.
Yep, we're a big fan of oyster mushrooms. They'll eat pretty much anything, and they are delicious.
Okay, but aside from the taste, the fungi could also provide a water resource. And with climate change, rising temperatures, this is so important. We've spoken about this before, and nature is wonderful in fixing the problems that humans often create.
Yeah, if only we could just stop making these damn problems.
Most of the times when folks are making materials, they use the reishi mushroom because mycelium is the strongest with that, or tends to be very strong with any polypore. But reishi is a really accessible one to grow and creates a product that is good for either medicinal use or for augmenting your coffee or tea with a little bit of immune boosting chemicals.
Extraordinary. So sounds like it's incredibly promising, but if we could steer this back to building materials, it also sounds like there are all kinds of technical difficulties and complexities.
Yeah, so when you're thinking about construction and getting people to use mycelium as a construction material, of course it's a big challenge. If you turn up to the site and present your client with a few mushrooms and saying, hey, these little guys will be strong enough to hold up your house,
You can call them crazy and say, be on your way.
Yeah, exactly. But these mycelium-based materials are stronger than concrete.
With our project in Namibia, we started a large store of the bricks that we're making. And, one of the bricks that's made from the waste of mushroom cultivation. Bricks like these that we've tested in our laboratories have a compressive strength of about 26 megapascals. It's more than 2.5 times what a normal concrete block be. So very, very strong. And it's the same weight as a concrete block. It's, similar volume. Ours are solid, where concrete blocks have cores or holes in them, but that's just because the material is so heavy.
Wow. Well, that sounds like it is quite similar to a concrete block.
Yeah, yes, but no.
It provides food and it stores carbon, and it's actually much better impact resistance.
This is just brilliant, right? So Chris is saying there's a potential here of using these blocks as a carbon sink.
Whoa, these blocks sound like they really tick all the boxes for a low resource environment.
It's great, isn't it? You think you've heard it all, but there's more.
This multifunctional material that in most cases actually can sequester carbon. So not only is it structural and insulative and fire resistant and sound attenuating and all these things that most building materials can't check all of those boxes, this is something that can take waste resources, actually make food while converting it into something that's of use. So it's just oozing with all these possibilities and all of these byproducts that are exactly what we need. If we continue to build the way that we're building now that is emitting carbon, buildings are responsible for about 40% of the world's carbon emissions. Imagine a scenario where you turn that on its head and the production of building materials actually storing carbon. All of those things came together for me and kind of excited me about the material. And having had this experience working in Africa and knowing that you have to leverage materials for A, B, and C, you have to get all of these things out of the resources you use. That's what really inspired me to put that into practice.
So Chris also talked about how these building materials could tick another really important box, especially in countries like Namibia. They can actually generate an income through payments for ecosystem services.
And those are ways of saying, okay, now if you're taking this product and you're actually storing carbon in that, we realize that you're not going to be able to compete with the huge carbon emitters, but we can pay you for that carbon storage. So that can go all the way from the farmer that actually thins the bush, that regenerates the wildlife refuge, and then that goes all the way to the person that makes the block at the end of the process too. And then we say, instead of letting this deteriorate and turn back into CO2, either in the form of burning it or letting it decompose, you're going to lock this away for decades in your brick. So there's going to be a carbon sale offset on that we can actually pay you for that and sell that as a carbon credit to the developed world that is doing the emitting. So that they should start paying for, their emissions, and the folks that are actually doing the good work of storing carbon should start getting paid for doing that work.
But Red House Studios, based in Cleveland, Ohio, that's not an area that seems to be lacking in resources. So how is fungi solving issues there?
We have a project in Cleveland where one of the waste resources we have here are actually abandoned homes. We've always had a problem with the city thinning out. During the mortgage crisis in 2008, that became exacerbated. And we have a group here called the Cuyahoga County Land Bank that demolishes around 175 houses every month. So all of this waste material is going to landfill.
So like Chris says, he and his team are actually developing a way to take the waste material, the suburban and urban waste material that he's talking about, and use mycelium to remediate and reconstitute it into new building products.
So in this one, we're not using it to create a product like a mushroom, but we're using it to do a service like remediation. And the way that works is when the mycelium grows, it secretes enzymes, and those enzymes can break down petrochemicals that are already in the built environment. And along with the mycelium actually uptaking things like heavy metals, we add some other biocomposites like biochar that can start to chelate things like heavy metals like lead and cadmium and arsenic that are in the built environment. And so thereby you make a material that then is actually safe in its use, but also safe in its disposal. We've done some tests where actually putting it through a landfill type characterization test, it shows that the leachate that comes out of the materials after this process significantly reduce the amount of metals that would go into the landfill itself and then into the water.
So we've mentioned reishi, oyster mushrooms. Does Chris have a favorite mushroom?
Everyone has a favorite mushroom.
Sorry, stupid question.
I love the taste of chicken of the woods. I like cooking that. I grow almost exclusively reishi in my workshop in Cleveland. There's this Acacia mellifera in Namibia, and we tried a whole bunch of things, but it's actually good fodder for reishi or oyster. But, going to look towards food security, oysters are obviously a better bet. It's also very hard to find reishi spawn in that part of the world. So we can get oyster spawn coming from South Africa.
I also have a favorite mushroom recently discovered to make. It comes from birch trees.
Oh, does it?
Chaga.
Chaga mushrooms.
Yes.
Have you been
Yes.
drinking chaga tea?
I have.
And how do you feel?
Well, I haven't been drinking it regularly enough to feel a difference, but I believe that it's going to be a superfood. It's going to turn me into Superwoman. Are you ready?
Again? More Superwoman.
More Superwoman. Well, this has been a super cool episode, Connor.
I know, we talked about the applications of mycelium in space, which was seriously cool, but look, it has real-world applications on the Earth, and that is also out of this world.
Okay, we're not going to do puns, and we're especially not going to do the same pun that I did at the beginning of this episode.
Oh, I know, okay, so fair enough. But, I just get all excited about fungi.
But this work is also quite serious and important. So sure, we can look at space exploration, we could look at poop on Mars and mushrooms on Mars and making things more sustainable, but the work that Chris is doing by looking at sustainable building resources for Namibia and taking care of waste in Cleveland, Ohio, these things are, wow, crazy important.
Yeah, and that's one of the criticisms that space exploration, especially by multi-billionaires, often gets. It's like, really, you're going to build a rocket to get away rather than spend your money fixing stuff here? But look, here we have somebody who's, doing both and using research on one side to help inform work on the other. So, hats off to Chris and the team. So thanks for listening. The executive producer of Discovery Matters is Andrea Killin. It was produced with the help of Bethany Grace Armitt-Brewster. Editing, mixing, and music by Tom Henley and Banda Productions. My name is Connor McKechnie.
And I'm Dodie Axelson. Make sure to rate us on whichever platform you use. And if you're a Cytivan, we love to hear from you, so you know how to reach us on email. We'll see you when we come back with another episode of Discovery Matters.